Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another science fiction lore video, and we're returning to the Versus Arena with a pretty fun one, because today we have a bit of a Bungie battle royale as we pit the offensive capabilities of the Covenant against the defenses of the last safe city from Bungie's Destiny. This battle is really interesting to me because we have a faction that is based almost totally on technology but is defined by religious practices and beliefs in the Covenant, and another that is more sort of space magic than technology. I don't normally do videos that account for space magic, even when talking about Star Wars, but this topic seemed really fun, so I wanted to give it a shot. Obviously that means the outcome will be a bit more speculation than usual, but I worked hard to make sure the answer was still fair and well informed, and I just hope you guys enjoy. So let's start with a basic overview of the two combatants. The Covenant was the largest political and military presence in the Milky Way during the 9th Age of Reclamation, or more aptly named by humanity, the Covenant War. They were a conglomerate of races unified under a religious reverence of the Forerunners, and they were motivated heavily by the acquisition and integration of Forerunner relics. Almost all of their offensive weaponry used plasma tech, i.e. superheated matter directed towards enemy ships and personnel. They were known to use the large guns of their capital ships to target a planet from orbit, melting the surface of the planet into glass in a technique that was known, well, as glassing. The Covenant was organized and broken up according to various client species. At the top of the military hierarchy were the elites, towering bipeds with an unaugmented strength to challenge a Spartan. Before the widespread deployment of Spartans during the war, the presence of elites on the battlefield left too few survivors to even confirm their existence until several years, at least that is according to Halo: The Fall of Reach. Elites also made use of personal energy shields, able to absorb all projectiles while active, although they could eventually be fatigued by extended suppressive fire, especially by energy-based projectiles. Brutes, before the Great Schism, held a fairly low place in the Covenant hierarchy and were often used as civilian mop-up troops, although would sometimes be sent to break enemy lines. They were massive heaps of flesh and muscle with alligator-like skin capable of shrugging off most projectiles. They've came out on top in several of my prior Versus videos, beating easily species like Wookiees. Jackals and Grunts, on the other hand, made up the bulk of the Covenant groundside forces. The Covenant made use of Jackals as snipers and tactical support, designed to rack up kills while the enemy was overwhelmed by Grunts. Grunts, unsurprisingly, were employed en masse, standing at 1.4 meters or 5.5 feet tall and weighing about 260 pounds. A single Grunt would be seriously threatening to the average human soldier. Covenant squads were typically made up of an elite commander, 2 to 4 jackals, and a few dozen grunts. As mentioned earlier, brutes were deployed independently or in specialized situations. In addition to their ground forces, the Covenant had several ground vehicles, including wraiths, specters, ghosts, and scarabs. Let's move on now to Destiny. The last safe city is, as the name describes, the final holdout of human civilization in the Destiny universe. It's built underneath the Traveler, an entity of light, one of the two major powers in the Destiny universe, and empowers its chosen with supernatural abilities. Under humanity, these chosen are given the name Guardians. The city itself has very minor defensive weaponry and no real orbital navy to speak of, thus the Guardians are the first and primary line of defense against a coming invasion force. The only other defensive asset of the city is the Wall, a massive structure built by the Titans to protect the city from invasion. In a direct attack, Guardians would be stationed on top and in front of the wall to keep those within the city safe. Guardians make use of standard infantry weaponry alongside a versatile range of powers. However, by far, the most impactful ability of the Guardian is tied to their ghosts, which can resurrect them during battle. Now, there are ways to kill a Guardian. For example, a Guardian cannot be resurrected if their ghost has been destroyed. However, it's unclear exactly how one can do that. We're going to rely on old Grimoire cards for this video, which suggest that a ghost can be destroyed by standard weaponry as long as it has revealed itself. In order to keep the matchup interesting, I'm going to be operating under the assumption that Covenant weaponry is sufficient to kill a ghost, which I think makes logical sense. So today we ask the question, what if the Covenant believed that the Traveler was a Forerunner relic crucial to the Great Journey? Once located, the Covenant would send the bulk of their fleets to Earth in order to take the Traveler for themselves. With death not really being a concern for Guardians, it makes any sort of large-scale battle difficult to measure. That's why I decided to use the Battle of Twilight Gap as the metric for this matchup. The Battle of Twilight Gap was a conflict in Destiny lore where the Fallen, one of the enemy races, nearly overcame the city's defenses. Eventually the Fallen were able to actually breach the wall, forcing the Guardians to stand at the breach and become a sort of living wall themselves. At the crux of the battle, Lord Saladan, who was leading the city's defenses at the time, issued a retreat order, claiming that the city had been lost. The destruction of the wall was too much to hold, and the Guardians were ordered to abandon the city and the Traveler. The final victory was only owed to 6 Guardians, who defied the retreat order and held the wall themselves. And I believe that in our scenario, total victory or defeat comes down to whether those 6 could stand up to a Covenant army. So with all that out of the way, let's see how this plays out. Obviously, the conflict would start when the Covenant arrive out of slip space over Earth. The city has orbital satellites which would detect the invasion. However, without a real space fleet, their only real option is to begin preparing defenses on the ground. The Covenant might start glassing, but would likely hold off because they would want to preserve the Traveler. I think instead, they may engage in a selective glassing campaign similar to what they did on Reach. If the Covenant did not believe the Traveler was a relic worth preserving, the planet would be glassed instantly, and the city would have absolutely no way to defend against this. The Covenant win 10 times out of 10. The glassing still, even if selective, would superheat the atmosphere and drastically reduce living conditions on the planet, but would not directly destroy the city. The Covenant would then deploy ground troops using Phantom and Spirit dropships. Once on the ground, the Guardians would make a perimeter around the wall to block their invasion. The tower really only has 2 lines of defense, as mentioned earlier, the Guardians and the wall. The Guardians would march out to meet the Covenant, the low visibility caused by the glassing, allowing both armies to move within close range. The Covenant's towering scarabs would be the first to be seen through the dust, prompting the Defender Titans to lay down shields and Warlocks to place their rifts. The Covenant would send out Grunts first, while the Jackals got into sniping position, reserving the elites to command from within the second wave. Even if Guardians destroy the first wave of Grunts effortlessly, which is certainly possible, it would give the Covenant more time to form a strategic position. Guardians are warriors most suitable to fighting in small fire teams, and have only been seen in massive battles a handful of times. The Covenant, on the other hand, are much more practiced in true military formations and would almost certainly have a major upper hand. However, the Guardians are still paracausal, god-slaying beings, and their power of resurrection is certainly a heavy factor in their favor. With the first wave of Grunts down, the second wave would charge, carrying a much more balanced formation of Grunts, shielded Jackals, and now commanding elites. Again, I think these formations wouldn't be able to pierce the Guardians, who are monster-killing machines in their own right, but by this point, Jackals and others would be in sniping position and would be able to start inflicting kills. The elites would press the charge, overtaking them in the confusion, only to find the defeated Guardians rising back again. The way the Covenant interprets this resurrection is critical. If they believe the Guardians are infected by the Flood, well, the planet's getting glassed. However, due to their desire to keep the Traveler intact, they would most likely continue to push. The elites would hold their positions, allowing for their scarabs to gain ground, also sending out banshees and ghost combat vehicles to divide the Guardians' attentions, now ordering Jackals to watch the Guardians who fall. This would lead to the discovery of the ghosts, which themselves would be attacked and several Guardians defeated for the final time. This would likely prompt a counterattack in order to give room for more Guardians to revive without their ghosts being killed, but this is essentially a battle of attrition, and the Covenant just have so many more numbers. What's more, landed scarabs would now be closing the distance into firing range and would inflict several more final final kills. While the Guardians are formidable and almost unkillable, the sheer numerical advantage and technological superiority of the Covenant would make it incredibly difficult to maintain ground. Thus, I believe Lord Saladin would, as he did in the cannon battle of Twilight Gap, issue a retreat order, forcing the Guardians to withdraw from battle. Of course, Lord Shaxx and his fire team of 6 would hold the wall, and perhaps this might even be where the Guardians shine, in a sort of makeshift raid team. But the question is it enough? Shaxx and the other Guardians would likely believe that their key is to take out the Scarab, which would take pressure off their ghosts so that they could re-enter. And Shaxx may even replicate a tactic where Lady Aphrodite threw Saladin like a javelin missile into a fallen walker, and that could even be successful, temporarily turning the tide. If they can destroy or neutralize walkers, I have no doubt that the Guardian squad could rip through Covenant forces, but the Covenant still have the brutes in reserve, and with their towering physique and aggressive demeanor, I think they would be much more challenging for a small fire team. Their close-range fighting style and ruthless destruction would make it almost impossible for a ghost to enter a scene without being shredded to pieces. If that's not the case, the sheer force of the Covenant will do so on their own. In their final stand, the Guardians would put up an incredibly impressive fight, with Shaxx being the last to survive. Even after running out of ammo, Shaxx would switch to his fist, as Titans do, decimating hordes of brutes in a final blaze of glory before finally succumbing to the truly overwhelming force. With the counteroffensive gone and the primary force retreated, the Covenant would march to the city with brutes, grunts, and jackals, destroying any of the citizens unable to evacuate. This one ends on a rather bleak note, at least for the Destiny universe, and it was really hard to measure since the Guardian forces are made up almost entirely of intangibles. However, trying to look at this fairly and objectively, I just don't see any way the Guardians can gain victory against a concentrated Covenant invasion. Quite simply, the city does not have a diverse enough defense, really only having those Guardians at their disposal. Even as unkillable as they are, the Covenant simply have a wider array of offensive and defensive tools to overwhelm the Guardians and take grounds, and I see them being totally successful 8.5 times out of 10. That number probably increases even further if we consider a more prolonged Covenant invasion, more forces, and more of their esoteric war machines. That is, however, just my opinion. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments, and if you have something you'd like me to answer in a future video, leave it as well with the hashtag AskEck. Anyway, that's all I have for today. As always, guys, have a great night, and may the Force be with you.